I want to take a moment in this topic to discuss some important features of native modules. These are concepts about native modules that are important to understand as you work with them more and more. So we're going to go through a list of these features, and on some of these I will show examples. So first off, native modules have module level scope. So what we've just done is we've introduced a new scope into JavaScript, and that has to do with modules. So let's look at an example of that. I think this is pretty obvious, but if utilities and app.js were not of the type module, then app.js could access that, this, without any of it being exported. It wouldn't need to be exported for it to access because those would be on the global scope. So for example, if I come over here into app.js and I enter console.log and then try to display punct, which is actually defined inside of utilities.js right here, but it's defined at the top scope. However, this is now module scope, so it's no longer global scope. Then let's go ahead and launch the live server version of this. I'm going to open the console, and uncaught reference error, punct is not defined. So we can see there that we have a new scope. We have module scope now. So anything defined in here is only available inside this module. Unless we export it, then it can be available outside. All right, so that's the first concept. Another concept is that modules always use strict mode. So in JavaScript, we can define strict mode at the top of the file like this, and then it causes more restrictive syntax with the code that we're writing. And I usually do this with my code. It's a good practice. But with modules, that's not necessary. We don't need to define that. It is that by default. And we can see that pretty easily by assigning a value to a variable before it is declared, like this. I don't have var, let, or const in front of it. Log that to the console. Now if I save this, let's see what happens. We get an uncaught reference error. Temp is not defined. So it's telling us that it has to be defined before we can assign a value to that. That is strict mode causing that to happen. Without strict mode, we'd be able to do this in JavaScript. Definitely not a good practice, and that's why strict mode doesn't allow it. So there we can see strict mode being used in modules. Next concept. Module code is evaluated on import. So what do we mean by this? Well, let me jump to our index.html. Now, normally when you're loading JavaScript files inside of an HTML file, at the time you place the script tag, that is when the JavaScript is loaded. Once it's loaded, it is then evaluated. It runs. Well, if they are marked with a module, they will only run when it's imported. Here we import utilities. Now, if a module is imported more than once, and there is certain code that runs whenever that JavaScript file is loaded, that will only happen the first import. It won't continue to happen each time we import that file. Let's take a look at that. So I'm going to create a new module here. I'm going to call it alert.js is all. And all I'm going to do is put an alert statement in there. I'm loaded. That's what we're going to alert. Save that. We are now going to import it here. And I'm just going to import the file. That's all I'm going to do. I'm not going to assign it to a variable. I'm not really exporting anything from it. So I'm importing it there, and then I'm going to use the same statement. Copy that. And I'm going to import it over here as well. Save that. Okay, let me go ahead and refresh that so we can see it from the beginning. When I refresh, I get the alert. I'm loaded. When I click OK, does it happen again? No. We don't get a second alert. Even though we load this file or import this file twice, this line only executes the first time it's imported. And that's all. Each additional time, it will not run that code. And that's an important thing to be aware of. Next concept. This is undefined. So in any modules, this within the module scope is undefined. Let's just use our app.js again. I'm going to console.log this. Now, if we were to do this inside of a regular JavaScript file that was attached to an HTML file, if we were to do it there, then this would show the window. It would be the window object. This becomes the top level scope, or the window. So let's save that and let's see what we get here. There's my alert, and we see undefined showing app.js 5, which is exactly that line, console log line. So this is undefined in any modules. Now, if I comment out these lines, come over to index.html and remove the type, let's see what we get. Here we get the window right there. Now we're getting an error becauseyname is no longer defined because we're not importing that module anymore. But we can see the console log this statement is now window instead of undefined. All right, let me change that back. I'm going to comment out this alert so it stops showing up. And let's go ahead and get these imports back too. All right, final concept we want to deal with. Module scripts are loaded with defer. Now, what does that mean? Well, when you set up script tags inside of an HTML file, you can use a defer attribute. And what that causes to happen is that when it encounters the script tag, it will begin loading the JavaScript, but it won't wait until it is loaded. It will continue working on the HTML file. Something else that happens with defer is it will wait until the HTML file is loaded before it does anything with the JavaScript, before it runs any of the JavaScript. So by default, modules, when they have a type module, they are loaded like that defer attribute was included with the tag. And as you think about modules, you can probably see why that would be necessary. We want to deal with them as modules, so let's don't have it hold up the loading of anything else. Let's continue loading other things. When they're loaded, then we're able to use the JavaScript code. So those are some features of native modules that are important to understand and be aware of as you work more and more with native modules. All right, let's move on.